Kress is the Kiwanis International in-house legal counsel. He has been on board with Kiwanis International about 2 years now, and given the education that we've had to undergo with COVID-19 and COVID-19 operations, I'm thankful as your district executive director that we have an in-house legal counsel to which we can now refer and call on. I don't think that David had anticipated spending quite as much time on COVID-19 issues as he did when he came aboard as Kiwanis International legal counsel. There were other issues, many of them also very complex, that he had to deal with. But this has become a primary issue in terms of his time and insight. And he was good enough to join us here this morning. So David, we are glad and thankful that you're here with us. I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation this morning.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate everyone taking time this morning to meet. When friends ask me, how it's going in my job, I say, well, I've learned more about COVID than I ever wanted to. And I'm obviously not a doctor, so I don't know the science side, but as Kevin said, it's affected everything, right? We're in meetings and travel, that's part of it's a main part of our business. Fundraising, meeting, that's what we do. So the last year's been a complete upheaval. So I want to start with one of the first questions I get all the time is, should we just not meet? First issue always is Kiwanis clubs are autonomous. If we've got a bunch of elderly members, maybe not meeting is the right thing to do. Certainly from Kiwanis International perspective, we prefer that we still meet and do what we can. So we don't want to stop meeting, we just want to change how we meet, whether that be virtually. I know a lot of people have been able to do virtual fundraising, and there's been a lot of drive-through fundraising, and a lot of drive-through food donations. So there are things you can do through COVID. We don't have to just shut down. So if we're going to meet, the big thing is number rule is on top of all the guidelines, and I'll put those in the chat room for those that haven't seen them. But Kiwanis International has posted guidelines on how to safely meet. But the number one rule in those is follow local law. So in Pennsylvania, if you've got a gathering size of X, then you have to follow that. Maybe you're in a city that's got a smaller size than the state. That was the case in Indiana with Indianapolis for a while. You have to follow whatever the law is there. Most places are requiring masks indoors. So if that's the law, that's what we have to follow. For me, the political mask debate we all read about online and talk about with our friends is kind of a non-issue with Kiwanis, because our decision isn't to decide whether masks are the right or wrong thing. Our decision is if masks are required inside when we meet, then we're a business and we follow the rule. And I know a fair amount of individuals disagree with that and think there's exceptions to that. And if there are legal exceptions, great. But if it's, I believe Pennsylvania is you wear a mask inside. So that's what we do at our meetings. A big part of it that I'm asked all the time, and some of you may have heard, some of this may be new to, if we're having meetings, we should ask the participants to sign a waiver. Now, I also live in the real world, and people have told me directly that, we're not going to have a club meeting that we've all been friends for 20 years and all sign a bunch of legal waivers. I understand that, and folks should govern themselves as they feel comfortable. I will say it gives a lot of legal protection. So for me, I wouldn't be offended by a friend asking. It's a way of saying, we've all decided to meet. We all know there's some risk in doing that. And this is our way of verifying to each other that we're not going to hold each other legally responsible. Kiwanis International puts its money where its mouth is there. Last year when we had a meeting in July, all the board members were required to sign the waiver. So there's no exceptions to, I'd like to attend and this is an important meeting and not sign. It's just the best protection. And a lot of that is people say, well, what's the chances we could go to a meeting and someone could say they really caught it here and sue the club, and all those things are true and the chances are low. But defending a lawsuit is expensive. So if someone files a lawsuit against the club would have to defend that. And as of November 1st, Kiwanis International districts, clubs, nobody has insurance for COVID claims. That's the insurance industry. Nobody that has renewed since COVID came out. If you had a 2-year policy, you might have some lingering protection. Our previous, up until November 1st, we were covered for COVID claims, but that's simply a matter of when our contracts run out. So our first contract started before COVID, anybody knew what it was or had ever heard of it. So therefore it was a unforeseen claim and covered. Now COVID is a known risk. And so to the insurance companies, their analogy, when you ask them, believe me, Stu Peterson, who runs our risk program, and we fought long and hard and ultimately unsuccessfully to say, we meet, this is a big part of what we want. And we asked, and they at least pretended they were listening, but ultimately they'll say, you can't buy insurance for your house while it's on fire. And that's the way they view it. So it's just not an option for any of us to get insurance to cover this. So the waivers are important. I encourage their use. So the next part of this is in Pennsylvania, the legislature did pass a bill saying that businesses, and it would have included Kiwanis, would be immune from COVID claims, which would give us a little more less legal risk, more opportunity. But your governor, the Pennsylvania governor, vetoed that, and the legislature, at least to this point, has not overridden that veto, so that is not a law. In some states, there's a little less risk. In Pennsylvania, it's a bit riskier to have a meeting. Fundraisers.
David?
Yeah, go ahead.
The legislature tried to override it, but they couldn't get sufficient votes to override it.
Okay, they didn't have enough votes. Okay, so they tried and failed. I didn't see that. If you're still having fundraisers or drive-through, any type of things, we realize you can't get waiver for people driving up in their car, you're handing them stuff. So you always have to be practical. We're not asking anybody to do something that doesn't make any sense. If, passing out the waiver and signing it and doing all that would take the transaction from a 10-second or 20-second handoff in a drive-through lane to a 2 or 3 minute transaction, that's worse for everybody. So the waiver just has to be analyzed for what are we trying to do in that particular instance. And when we get to the question and answer session, I'm happy to, every time I meet with a group, I get new ideas and hear of new meeting situations and maybe new ideas. One of them is people are starting to hold fundraisers again, and especially organizing fundraisers for those in the northern 2/3 of the country that probably have 2 or 3 months to go to do things outside, but they're still organizing them. If you're going to have something outside that's relatively safe and you're going to be outdoors and you're going to have tickets, and that can be electronic or an actual ticket, but you can do this online, where people are going to come, you can have on the ticket that by attending the event, the participant waives any claim for COVID. Now, I want to caution that that's not a waterproof solution. It's water resistant. There still could be some leaking, but it's better than nothing. And a court would certainly look at, hey, the club told everybody about this risk. The person saw this. If it's electronic, you can have a checkbox to say they accept the risk. And it really does provide some protection. So it's a good idea. A lot of clubs do this on tickets, they do that for photos already. There's a photo disclaimer that says, if you're at our event, we take your photo, you may end up on one of our web pages. It's a similar thing, and it really could just be one sentence saying, by attending X event, I acknowledge that there are risks for contracting infectious diseases, and I will not hold Kiwanis responsible. Kevin, I'll send you particular language if you want to send it out to the group that can be used. But that's a good idea for people doing fundraisers, and most things are online now for signups. So you can add that box. Again, I want to caution, this doesn't eliminate risk; it just limits it, and that's kind of the entirety of COVID. We still don't completely understand it even in the medical community. We don't know why sometimes there's super spreader events and sometimes people do things we've all seen with no masks and inside, and you don't hear about anybody catching it. I guess my last piece, and then I'll go to some question and answers, is as people get vaccinated, it would be two things. As people get vaccinated, currently the CDC still requires people that are vaccinated to wear masks. So, you know, I imagine we'll all start encountering, hey, I've had my shots, so you don't need to worry about me. And there are some in the medical community that think that's true, and it may be eventually be true. Current guidance from the CDC, which we're going to follow here in the United States, says that the person still could be a carrier. It's a lower likelihood, but that person could be a carrier even though they don't suffer many effects. So we just have to be aware of that as people get vaccinated, which is a good thing. We still have to require the masks and any other rules. So I guess that's kind of my overarching thing. Again, still try to meet to the extent you can. Clubs that my club has decided it's going all virtual. But we were meeting still in the fall when it was warm at outdoor venues, you know, where we could have a lot of social distancing. And I know our club is planning to do that again once the weather breaks. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments or things that they're running into as they're navigating this.
David, this is Kevin. I do have one comment, and you reviewed this for us. The district adopted a pretty, we're planning right now, at least based on the information that's available to us, to have the district convention be a live event with some type of hybrid format available to those that opt not to attend live. But we will have some very stringent COVID-19 protocols that we'll be following and that the district board has adopted. The only real question that we have to settle is whether we will be insisting on vaccination proof or not, and we can't make that decision yet today. But you know, we have adopted these protocols. They will impact how we will do events. For example, we will not have hospitality rooms at district convention just because of COVID-19. But you know, the district has adopted them, and if the club is having a large scale event in particular, they should carefully consider those. And if the participants would like, I can send them what the district has adopted as well.
Okay, a couple questions have come into the chat room. Is you can put the waiver online. That's how Kiwanis International has done events. So people have all signed the waiver before they've attended, right? They've signed and returned it before attendance. That's not always practical. If you're talking for the fundraiser where it's just hey, and it's really not a waiver because they're not physically signing it. And there's situations where sometimes that's just not possible for people coming into rooms and leaving rooms. That's where I'm advising. And yes, you can do that online, and I will send language. I'm not going to put in the chat room, but I'm going to send it to Kevin and let him distribute it. You can have a checkbox. You can just say, you know, once they sign up to attend and pay their fee, you can have a sentence that says, I acknowledge this, and you check it. And it's going to go a long way if anybody makes a claim. But to Kevin's point, in the protocols, those are still the number one thing. You know, I'm a lawyer, so I focus probably too much on legal liability. That's my job. But our number one goal is to keep everyone safe and healthy. The last thing we want is an event where a lot of people get sick. You know, to my knowledge, we haven't had any of those anywhere in the Kiwaniverse. We've had isolated incidents where we've heard one or two, but we haven't heard, you know, hey, there was a meeting and half the people there have COVID, and we want to keep it that way. You know, we're all have COVID fatigue, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's very important that we maintain the stringency of the protocols until we get there. Kevin brought up the COVID, you know, whether you acquire vaccines. That's a decision each district and club is going to have to make. And we're not far enough along for international to have considered that because the vaccine's not readily available to enough people. And Kathy asked, require temperature checks. That is in the guidelines. I would definitely require temperature checks. They're unfortunately finding that there are a lot of people that have COVID, have the virus, that aren't showing a temperature. But again, it's one more screening mechanism. So if you eliminate one person that could have infected people, that's worth it. And it's a very simple thing to do. Sarah asked where the secretaries keep the waivers. I'm not sure how everyone's doing it. You know, for our meeting, we had one file and we maintained them, but ours was a three-day meeting that you met. You know, we obviously only had people sign it once. I've said, and I'll say again, if you're having if it's for just the normal club meetings of the club members, you don't have to sign at every meeting. You can say, because the way the event is defined, you can say club meetings from January 1st to March 31st. I would do it at least every quarter and then renew it, but you don't have to do it every time. That kind of addressed a certain amount of time. In the box that you fill in that defines event, you can define that however you want. So you can say the fundraiser on January 1st. You can say all club meetings of, you know, the Kiwanis Club of Erie from January 1st to March 31st, whatever, however you want to define that. The waivers themselves, I'm getting a question. It's good to maintain them in a secure place, but they're not, there's no personal identifying information, so it's not a big data privacy risk. If people are requiring a negative COVID test, or you're going to get a vaccination, that would be medical information, and that's got to be very strictly guarded. I would not recommend getting the actual negative COVID test from people. I would recommend that you have a certification for people to check that they've had a negative COVID test, if that's what you're doing. Or if we get to the point where we're requiring vaccinations to do that, it does open up a lot of data privacy issues to actually get that. I understand that it's putting people on their honor, but for the most part, as a legal matter, if they've checked that and they're not telling the truth, we're still going to be protected. No court's going to say, well, you should have gone further. And I would hope in the Kiwanis world, no one's going to lie about that. You know, that if we're asked, you know, have you had a negative COVID test, you're not just going to make it up. So Miranda asked for the protocol for a drive-through event. You should maintain 6 feet if you can. Masks should still be worn, even if we're outside. We've done a few at Kiwanis International, and everybody's wearing masks. I've seen some creative things online. We've not done this yet, but I think it's cool. I've wanted to. I just don't know where to find them. Is the pizza oven pans that use for pizzas. I've seen people secure those, and they've done that for drive-through events, so you can maintain a greater distance. You don't even have to hand things off. But really, it's just for drive-through, it shouldn't be any different than that. A big thing is, you know, you should make it quick. If it's a drive-through event, you know, a lot of people, people, you shouldn't still stop and have a 5-10 minute conversation right next to each other. You know, of course, you're going to say, hi, how are you doing? Catch up a little bit, but the interaction should be kept short. Yeah, Janet asked about a COVID questionnaire. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. And that's why it's, you know, I'm trying to, on behalf of KI, give overall guidance. It's hard to get very specific because there's a lot of different options. And we have clubs that, you know, say we want to take every single precaution and have very stringent protocols, and people that know each other well. And we have other clubs that say, people are still making too big of a deal of this, you know, as long as you wear a mask, there's not much to worry about. And really those clubs have to make those decisions. So we can't, they're guidelines, not requirements. And that's for a legal reason too. I know not every club's going to do the same thing, and we want to be able to defend anything that a club decides. I'm not seeing any questions I've missed. If anybody else is, speak up or throw it in there again. Or Sarah, Kevin, if you're seeing one, please speak up.
Did you answer the Janet Owen question?
Which one?
Oh, you did, sorry. From Janet Owen.
Yes.
Yes, you did, sorry. Okay. Any other questions for David? Okay.